Hello Year 10, welcome to lessons 5 and 6 of our course Living in Nazi Germany. Now then, I've put these two lessons together because they're difficult to separate. Nevertheless, you can pause and stop this video at any time and come back to it. If you're using the same browser, it'll remember where you're up to as well, because I've uploaded this to YouTube. It is an unlisted video. Please do not share the link. However, there are three main reasons why the Nazis were able to keep control, and we'll talk about those in a moment. And there's a super secret fourth reason, living inside. This is chapter 2 of our 5 chapters. The first chapter, how it was that Hitler was able to become dictator from being chancellor in just a year. That was covered by, just one talk through, one video. That's pretty much all you need to know, the big debate being legal or violent. So now we're moving on to how the Nazis were able to keep control. This will be a longer unit because there's more to discuss. By now you know how this works. I look down at the keyboard whilst I share a screen, but this time I'm going to remove my face. There is a review. What you will do is I'll fire up the questions. You will then pause the video and write down your answers, either at the back of the notebook you're using or on a scrap of paper. Ideally, you should know these answers already, so don't worry about writing down the right answers unless you've got them horrendously wrong. Here are the questions. 1. What event was blamed on the communists and used by the Nazis to pass a law restricting freedoms? 2. What was the name of the act Hitler used to pass extreme laws in Germany? 3. What happened the day after the Nazis gave German workers a national holiday? 4. What did the law against the new formation of parties do? And 5. Who were the victims of the Night of the Long Knives? If you're playing along, you'll pause the video now, so pause. I'm now going to assume you have paused and have come back to this video having written your answers. What was your answer to question 1? Of course, it's the Reichstag fire. Extra marks if you got the date, which was the 27th of February, 1933. What was the name of the act Hitler used to pass extreme laws in Germany? Of course it was. It's the Enabling Law, or the Enabling Act, passed on the 24th of March 1933 in the Kroll Opera House, with an incredible amount of intimidation. Extra marks for the date. What happened the day after the Nazis gave German workers a national holiday? You are, of course, correct. They shut down the trade unions. That was the 2nd of May 1933. What did the law against the new formation of parties do? Well, it was passed in July 1933. Extra marks if you got that one. I think it was the 27th. It meant that no new parties could be formed in Germany and essentially created a one-party state. If you said that it just left the Nazis in charge, that's a perfectly acceptable answer. Well done. Who are the victims of the Night of the Long Knives? Well, you might have names, extra marks for the names, but essentially it's the SA. If you've written Ernst Röhm, have a mark, though hopefully you've spelled his name right, R-O, umlauts, H-M, that's the 2 dots above the O. You could, of course, have written it anglicised, R-O-E-H-M, that's also works, Röhm. You can also, of course, mention von Kahr, K-A-H-R, but you don't need to remember his name. You could have mentioned Gregor Strasser, the guy that was gunned down outside his house, but again, you don't have to remember his name. That's S-T-R-A-S-S-E-R, but you don't have to remember his name. So, hopefully, now you've got a feel of it. Now, in the PowerPoint, you'll notice that the second slide is this. It is designed to be used and printed off as an A3 sheet. You will notice that it's got fill-in sections. So in a moment, I'm going to go through these sections and you're going to fill them in on your version. Now, if you're playing this right, you obviously won't have checked the rest of the PowerPoint. You won't just steal the answers from elsewhere. That does seem a bit unfair. So do the best you can. Here we go. Here's that triangle. I'm hoping you have your own version. If you don't, pause the video now. Good. If you've got it already, let's talk about this. There are main reasons why the Nazis were able to keep power in Germany. The answer is, of course, 3. These reasons, to make sure the Nazis kept power, it's a W and a T. They worked together. Yeah, I know, it's basic, it's simple. At the top, I've given you an image of a famous election poster, and we are referring to, well, there's arrows as well, we are referring to this one here. It's the top on your version, it's here on my version because I have to have space, and that is also this. You might recognize him, you might not, and also this fellow. You should recognize him. So let's talk about it. At the top there, we're talking about support, indeed. People who genuinely wanted the Nazis in power. At the bottom right, where I've got that grinning fellow with a death's head cap on, you may recall his face from that lesson I told you about how the Nazis prepared for a crisis. It's terror, pant-wetting fear. Here's, of course, you've got it, Heinrich Himmler. Well done. The pirate. He pretended he'd lost an eye. And this fellow over here, standing on a box to make himself look taller, but clearly doing a Hitlerian sort of dynamic move with his hands, is, of course, yeah, he's not a gerbil. It is Joseph Goebbels. And we are referring to a real goose, a propaganda. Sorry, that's an appalling joke. I'm sorry. I'm never going to stop. Support then, I'm going to supply you with this one straight off. But before I do, you should already know different groups that supported the Nazis and why. So pause now and fill those in. Pause. Here's my answer. You can use it if you like. It says many Germans actively supported Hitler, if not the Nazis. They had no love for the Weimar Republic Hitler replaced. The support increased during the 1930s as it appeared the Nazis were doing good things for Germany, like solving unemployment and reversing the terms of the Versailles Treaty, the TOV. Don't worry, haven't told you about that, we'll come back to it. By 1939, and this is important, the vast majority of Germans supported Hitler. If not the Nazis, they definitely supported Hitler. Now you'll notice I've got the arrows here, and I've labelled my first arrow. I've explained how support helps terror. Note the direction of the arrow. You'll also see that propaganda helps support. You might have noticed that. And propaganda helps terror as well. And we'll talk about those when we talk about propaganda. Support helps terror in the following way. It creates loyal people who are prepared to inform on others, improving terror. See how it works? It basically makes a sentence between the two terms. Now, if you're really clever, you can presuppose what's going to go on those other two arrows and maybe even start filling it in, because I imagine you've got an idea how these might work together. But what I'm doing here is I'm creating links that will be used in an essay, for example. We're going to talk about terror and pant-wetting fear. I'm going to talk to you about Heinrich Himmler. You don't have to take notes on this bit. These are here, well, they're shocking, and I'm just going to take you through them. Here's what Himmler said about various things. You can see him dead there in the black and white image, and you can see one of his favourite photographs of himself, a colorized version of him in his black uniform. He said, the best political weapon is the weapon of terror. Cruelty commands respect. Men may hate us, but we don't ask for their love, only for their fear. Get a measure of the sort of man that says stuff like that. He says, I know there are some people in Germany who feel sick when they see this black uniform. We can understand their feelings and do not expect many to love us. He knows he's a monster. And finally, the most terrifying quote of them all. One principle must be absolute for the SS man. We must be honest, decent, loyal, and comradely to members of our own blood and to no one else. What happens to the Russians, what happens to the Czechs, is a matter of utter indifference to me. Such good blood of our own kind as there may be among the nations, we shall acquire for ourselves, if necessary, by taking away the children and bringing them up among us. Whether the other peoples live in comfort or perish of hunger interests me only insofar as we need them as slaves for our culture. Whether or not 10,000 Russian women collapse from exhaustion while digging a tank ditch interests me only insofar as the tank ditch is completed for Germany. Yes, Heinrich Himmler is an absolute monster. He is possibly insane. He is an evil, twisted man. And yet he has full control of the SS and the terror state within Germany. And you get a feel for what that terror state's going to be like. How did it work? Well, it bases itself on the organisation of the Nazi Party. You can see here a diagram published in German for the people under the Nazis explaining how it works. But I'll just talk you through. The size of the Nazi Party and the nature of its organisation helped the Nazis establish their police state. If you're ever asked how terror state worked, this is going to be useful. The Nazi Party was so large, had over 5 million members by 1938, that it was able to supervise every German citizen, and it absolutely was. Now, by supervise, I mean snoop. They keep an eye on each other. They dob people in. Not all of them are, goose-stepping full-on Nazis. That's not how it works. But they worry about other people dobbing them in. The cartoon here is from the German propaganda magazine Signal in 1941. It's propaganda. Obviously, it oversimplifies, and it increases this feeling that you're being watched. And it does so, well, you can see for yourself. Basically, it shows the efficient organisation of the Nazi Party. Germany is split into 32 Gaue. Here we are, plural of Gau is Gaue. These are regions, if you will, each led by a leader, a Gauleiter. I've told you before that Goebbels was promoted to Gauleiter of Berlin. So Berlin was a region. Each Gau, it should just say Gau, not Gaue, each Gau was divided into 760 Kreise, or districts. Der Kreise, here it is, district. These were further divided into 21,534 Ortsgruppen, or organizational groups. You could just say groups. That's this section here, a smaller thing. And you can see it's got a town hall in it. It's got sports facilities. It's got a swimming pool. It's got various bits where you can see people organizing on a large scale. The Ortsgruppen were divided into 70,000 Zellen, or cells. So you can see there's approximately, what would that be? Around about 30 to each. Is it 30 or, yeah, 3 or 4 perhaps, to each of those Ortsgruppen. And you can see that it's kind of like a small town or a village. The Zellen were divided into 400,000 Blöcke, or blocks, der Block. Well, a bit like our blocks, you go round the block, right? Each block consists of around 30 to 40 houses or flats. The block leader, the person in charge of the block, was a Nazi, and they were responsible for keeping an eye on their neighbours, snooping on them, and reporting them to party officials if they broke any rules or looked suspicious. Now, 30 to 40 households is approximately 100 to 120 people, roughly speaking. And what you've got there, then, is a fairly easy way of keeping track of things. Your neighbourhood busybody was likely to join the Nazi party because it gave them a reason to be a busybody. It gave them a reason to exist. It allowed them to identify opponents very quickly, real or imagined, and then arrest them very quickly too. So on its own, this explains how that informant network that came from support worked. But it does not explain how terror made people not want to oppose the Nazis, for want of a better phrase. To do that, we have to talk about how the there's an S where there shouldn't be, how the terror state functioned. How did the terrorist state, oh dear, sorry, this is what happens when you record these late at night and you don't spot things till the end. By the end of this session, I say session because it's 2 lessons, by the end of this session, all of you are going to understand how the terror state functioned and how the areas of it worked together to make it work. Most of you will be able to explain why it was successful in maintaining order with reference to key and specific examples. Now, all of you will be able to do this by the end of the course, but by the end of these 2 lessons, most of you will be able to do it. Some of you, by the end of these 2 lessons, will be able to assess the success of the terror state through the use of source materials and link it to other areas. Now, I stress, we haven't discussed these other areas yet. I've mentioned support in passing, but I haven't explained it, and I've given you no information about it. That's why I've said some of you by the end of these 2 sessions. The reason is you will have prefigured and worked out where we're going and will have made assumptions, and they will likely be correct. That's why it's only some. The vast majority of you, and let's be honest, I'd include myself in that if I were in your position, probably won't be able to make that link just yet. So don't worry if you don't make it straight off. If you sat there going, well, I've no idea how it works with other things. That's unfair. No, I said some of you. Some of you will pick it up and go, oh, some of you will have ideas and go, oh, possibly. And some of you will be sat there going, no, not going there. That's okay. Do not worry. We will pick that up as we go through the other sections. The task is as follows. I'm going to give you, on the next couple of slides, the cut and stick sheets. So you haven't been given them, and I apologise. If you can, print them out. If you can't, write them out. I don't mind. Whatever works for you, I'd like you to create your own diagram before I give you the answers. You're going to create that diagram showing how the Nazi terror state worked. Now, if you're worried, find an A3 sheet of paper, for example, and if you can print these off, ace, cut them out, stick them down. If you can't, write them out where you think they go. That way, if it's right, you can stick it straight into your notes. And if it's wrong, you can bin it and just take the right answers. It says be prepared to feedback on your answers. You can't. Sorry. If you complete this, and you might do so, then explain why it is there is a particular person at the centre. Yes, there is a particular person at the centre. I wonder if you spotted my hint. And why the terror state was so successful. Now, to be fair, these are optional extra tasks. In a lesson, I would give you 15 to 20 minutes to complete this. However, you're working at home. You can have as long as you need. What I would ask is, after I've shown you the cards, that you pause the video before I go through the answers and have a go. before I go through the answers. That way, you learn. We learn by making mistakes. We learn by getting things wrong. So have a go first before you try doing it. Don't pause yet. Here are the cards. Now, on the PowerPoint attached to the Show My Homework, you'll find these slides in the right place. I've moved everything around to make it more accessible for working from home. You'll see across the top here, there are 5 people. There are 4 headings. Each of these headings requires a person underneath the headings. And yes, 2 of the people up here, Reinhard Heydrich and Reinhard Heydrich, are the same person. They're Reinhard Heydrich, but they have different, Reinhard Heydrich has 2 jobs. So with that, does he go under 2 of the headings? Well, yes, obviously, but which 2? Theodor Eicher, he's head of something called the Death's Head units, and you might have to work backwards. You might have to work out which of these cards here goes under which heading to work out which person goes under these things. I mean, if you can print this off in colour, that'd be amazing. But if you can't, you can copy it out. If you can't do the images, please don't worry, just write down the names. I said to watch out for a person at the centre. There are 4 headings, 5 people. One of those people goes at the centre. There are 4 headings, I would argue. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops. Sorry. Skip too far. Basically, the 4 corners. 1 heading here, 1 heading here, 1 heading here, 1 heading here. Back up there again. So the 4 corners each get a heading, somebody in the middle, and then each of those headings gets a picture, and each heading gets 4 of these cards. Because you'll notice there are 16 cards. So that's how that one works. If you want to go further, this section over here is sideways. I don't know if you've noticed, but that's the title. If you don't want to write out a title, you can print it out, stick it down. These are images. They're the right way up. They're not sideways, and they can be used to illustrate the various headings. And these 4 chevrons are supposed to be arrows. The idea being 4 outer things point to the middle. Here, here, and here, and here, and they point to the middle. Oh dear. I hope you didn't see that. So tried to tell me that I was trying to use a touchscreen, which I wasn't. Also on this side, you'll find some extra cards, an extra 8 cards. That means there's an extra 2 cards for each of the 4 headings. These are optional. If you feel you need an extra challenge, use these. There are an extra 2 images and an extra 2 quotes to help explain things. All will become clear later. If you want to use them, feel free to do so. And if you don't. You only need this slide here to actually make the diagram. This is all optional extras. So now that that's in place, here's the slide. Pause the video, have a go at the task. I'm going to assume you've paused and have had a go at the task. So here are the answers. The Nazi terror state, 1933 to 1945. How did the Nazi state keep control of Germany? And you'll notice where I've put my images in the top 2 corners. Now, there is still a hint about who's in the middle. Have you figured it out yet? Of course, it's Heinrich Himmler himself, the chicken farmer. The 2 quotes, the historian's quotes are there. I'm not going to read them through, but you get an idea of what's going on. Craig's talking about how the enormities refers to the way in which they had terrible things that they did. And the knowledge that they did them, even if you didn't know what they were, terrified people. It's terror. It's pant-wetting fear. People dare not oppose the Nazis. It's not that they can't or that the terror state is somehow uber efficient. They're just scared of it. That's what keeps people in line. It's the same thing in school. We terrify you into keeping in line. That's the theory. One of my favorite techniques as a teacher is to threaten people with, you won't like the consequences of what you're doing. I don't know what they are, and they don't know what they are. And the unknown tends to keep people in line. I say I use that phrase. I don't. You've heard me speak. The other thing, Williamson argues that Himmler actually kept the Nazi state running. Without the steadying effect, he calls it, then chaos would have taken control. One of the things we talk about later in history, if you stick around until A-level, is the Nazis are nowhere near as efficient as they look and as they try to project themselves. And we'll talk about that more with propaganda. They're actually a mess. They're an utter chaotic mess. And the SS stops them spinning out of control and essentially self-destructing. So the first heading is the Schutzstaffel. Do not worry if that's not your first heading or if you didn't put it in the top corner here. As long as you've got that heading and the right cards appear underneath, it does not matter where it appears. I just happen to have started there. The Schutzstaffel is led by Reinhard Heydrich, the head of the SD, the Sicherheitsdienst. More about that in a moment. That's a form of internal security. Sorry about keep using the German. You know me, I like German. It started out as Hitler's bodyguard of 200 men. You might remember that from Nazi organizations when we're talking about how the Nazis organized to take to use a crisis. It became large, powerful, and very obvious. It included the SD, an internal spy network to find enemies of the Nazis. It was supposed to be the racial elite, so they only included the blonde-haired, blue-eyed fit men, not the blue-haired, blonde-eyed fit men. And by fit, I mean physically fit. I don't mean like, oh, fit. Can I still use that? Hench? Is that worse? That's probably worse. Sorry, I'll stop trying to tap into the zeitgeist and popular culture. And finally, of course, it had its own army in the form of the Waffen-SS, the force of the SS, which was under Himmler's direct control. Now, if you've got extra cards, you can talk to me about them in the comments. If you've not used the extra cards, I don't intend to go through them here because there's no point. So don't worry. From here on in, I'm just doing the 4 cards. So hopefully you've got a chance to see those where they go. I'm now going to skip out and put in extra notes if you want to add them. So formed in 1925, Himmler only takes control in 1929. After the SA are weakened in the Night of the Long Knives, NOTLK, then they grow rapidly. They take control of the police and they set up the Sicherheitsdienst. And as a consequence, they work together to destroy opposition. They carry out the Nazi race policies. They take control of concentration camps in 1934 and have them run by Death's Head units. By now, you should be guessing about one of those images and where they go. The Gestapo, the Geheimstaatspolizei, the secret state police, was set up in 1936 as part of the SS, and they are immune to most laws. They can do what they want. The Waffen-SS was separate too, but fought alongside the German army, the Wehrmacht, in the Second World War, and toward the end of the war, almost the same size. SS men were Aryans. Remember, the Nazis didn't want everybody to be Aryan. They simply viewed the Aryan as the master race, the Herrenvolk, the creators of culture. Other people, the bearers of culture, those who copied the Herrenvolk, were perfectly acceptable. So be wary. But the SS men were supposed to be Aryan. They were supposed to be the Herrenvolk. And they were ultimately loyal to Hitler. Remember, they're his bodyguard. The second group I'm going to look at is the Gestapo, the Geheimstaatspolizei. You can just refer to them as the secret police or the Gestapo. Either's fine. Gestapo's more historically accurate. But if you wrote secret police, no examiner is going to mark you down. Who's in charge of the Gestapo? Oh, look, it's Reinhard Heydrich, once again. And yes, his job title was leader of the Gestapo. He was Himmler's subordinate. That was a hint about who was in the middle. Don't know if you spotted it. They could operate above the law. They could do what they liked. And if they broke the law, well, then the law was wrong. And they relied on ordinary Germans informing. There's a reason for this. There aren't many of them. There's something like one Gestapo agent to every 22,000 Germans. They cannot go out and investigate crimes themselves. They have to rely on people dobbing other people in, basically. They had sweeping powers of arrest. And that's what you'd write in an exam, by the way, because that's what they have. It's a technical term, genuinely. It means that they could send people to the concentration camps without a trial, and they could arrest on suspicion, i.e. if they didn't like the look of someone or they thought they looked suspicious, they could arrest them. The end. There was no other requirement needed. In our country, to be arrested, you have to be suspected of breaking a crime. In Nazi Germany, no such guide or guidance was given. You could arrest anyone you liked if you were part of the Geheimstaatspolizei. They created a deliberate climate of fear. That is, you never knew who it was that was letting the Gestapo know what you were doing. It was all very secretive. No one's going to say, I've dobbed you into the Gestapo. Well, they might, but if they did, you don't know who else is doing it too. So I guess you've got to watch yourself all the time. And their aim was to make enemies harmless. That was their job. That was their slogan, if you like, the strapline, through fear of being caught. Now, you might say, sir, that's not how law works. Laws are based on a proportional response. But that's not true. Note how your parents, or, well, I'm going to say your parents because I don't know who else you know that drives, are perfectly happy to speed unless there's a speed camera. It's the speed camera that makes them keep to the speed limit, not a belief that they're breaking the law if they don't keep to the speed limit. This makes a lot of sense, right? It's the fear of being caught. The Gestapo successfully got the idea across that they would get you if you broke the law, and therefore people didn't break the law. The Nazi law, that is. So the Gestapo, the secret state police, they're led by Reinhard Heydrich of the SS. They're sweeping powers of arrest, they can transfer without trial, all this new, not new rather. Information was given by informers. Sorry. It's a song by Snow. There are millions of Nazi Party members. Most Germans are loyal to Hitler, bear in mind, and one block leader to every about 100 people means that you're going to get an awful lot of reports about non-Nazis doing stuff. They created an intentional climate of fear. It was absolutely intentional what they did. And people, children, were encouraged to inform on their family, and you never know who was watching. There are tales of Gestapo agents who see people doing stuff in crowds, go home, get changed into a uniform, go back out in their police uniform, find that person and arrest them for the crime they saw them doing when they weren't wearing a uniform. The person has no idea they were observed doing it, but they do know they were arrested for it. Does that make sense? And that creates a climate of fear because you don't know who's watching. Apparently, I do this by accident in school. Apparently, I'm too quiet and I sneak up behind people and they don't know I'm there. The aim, of course, is to make enemies harmless. I have been known to make Mr. Cuthbert jump even when I knock on his door. One historian has this to say: the Gestapo power most open to misuse was the Schutzhaft, the protective custody. Now, the video clips that I've been showing you on how the Nazis took power talk about the Schutzhaft. This meant that they had the power to imprison people without asking the courts. An oddity of the system was that the prisoner had to sign his or her own Schutzhaftbefehl, an order declaring that they had requested imprisonment, presumably out of a fear of personal harm, which, in a way, was true. They're in a room with a bunch of Gestapo agents that want them in jail. Gee, I wonder what might happen if you don't sign it. Thousands of political prisoners in Germany, and from 1941 in the conquered territories under the Night and Fog Decree, and we'll come back to that when we talk about how they deal with occupied territories, simply disappeared under Gestapo custody. Can you see why people are scared? You don't know why people get arrested, and then they don't come out. The third area I'm going to talk about are the police and the courts. How law is administered. The leader of this, the personality I've associated, is Judge Roland Freisler, the head of the Nazi legal system and chief judge. He is clearly an impartial observer when it comes to political crimes in the courts, the people's courts that he runs. Oh no, wait, there he is. He's doing a Nazi salute. Oh, I see. Freisler believed that crime was genetic, and therefore anyone that broke the law had to be stopped from having children. And the easiest way of dealing with that was simply to execute anyone who broke any law for any reason. After all, crime is genetic. So if you shoplifted or if you attempted to assassinate someone, you face the same sentence: death. He ordered over 2,600 executions in his time in power. In fact, every case that came before Freisler was given an execution. They were found guilty and they were executed. He's the one who executes Sophie Scholl, for example. More about that in a moment. In fact, his death during a bombing raid in Berlin was because he was trying to collect documents to prove that the defendant would have to be executed. He went back to get them, and that's when the bomb got him. There were no fair trials. Everyone was assumed to be guilty if they were arrested. After all, if the Gestapo had arrested you, they had to have good reason. That's basically how the courts were supposed to operate. And so, yeah, there's no such thing as a fair trial. You were guilty of something. No smoke without fire, which, I don't know if you're aware, isn't right or real or true. A new court had been set up by the Nazis called the People's Court, and it was there to try, we call going to court being tried, political prisoners to political crimes, if you will, thought crimes. They'd done or thought or believed the wrong things. Any enemies of the Nazis were guilty of a political crime and could be taken to a People's Court, which was run by Judge Roland Freisler, who ordered 2,600 executions, and you're beginning to see how this works. Judges were encouraged to be harsh and find people guilty by a special thing called judges' letters. Basically, the Nazis wrote letters to leading judges if they disagreed with the sentences that had been passed. They usually said that the sentences weren't harsh enough. No one ever got told off for not giving a harsh enough sentence. As a consequence, not giving too harsh a sentence, my apologies. So obviously judges, worried about their jobs, worried about themselves being found guilty in a people's court, would go for the harshest possible sentence to please their Nazi masters. You begin to see the legal system isn't terribly protective of a defendant. The death penalty becomes more and more common, because the death penalty stops people breaking the law. Oh no, wait, research shows that that actually isn't the case. People who break the law never believe they're going to get caught. It's the Gestapo that stops people breaking the law. But that doesn't matter. Harsh punishments, very popular. 1934, that was when the People's Court was established with Judge Roland Freisler at its head. The aim was to try opponents of Nazism, and they controlled magistrates and judges, meaning there's no such thing as fair trials, hence why in the notes it says they're fair trials ? A modern historian has this to say: nearly 90% of all trials ended with sentences of death or life imprisonment, the sentences frequently having been decided before the trial. Between 1942 and 1945, yes, that's the last 3 years of the Nazis being in power, more than 5,000 death sentences were handed out, 2,600 by Freisler alone. Freisler headed the 1943 trials of the members of the White Rose Resistance Group, that's the photograph there, that's Sophie Scholl, she's 16, and ordered many of its members to be executed by guillotine, because guillotines are apparently a humane form of death. All the top police were replaced by Nazis. They reported directly to Himmler. Their job was to snoop on Germans, and if they broke the law to do so, that would be overlooked. And if a Nazi agent broke the law, there was a good reason for them doing so, and that, of course, was ignored. And you begin to see how the terror state does pant-wetting fear. Now, you can send people to the concentration camps without a trial. You don't have to be found guilty of anything. So what made the concentration camps so scary? They're not death camps. Death camps don't come in until later in the war, and they're murdering Jews. And the vast majority of Germans aren't Jews, so they're not going to worry about that. So why are the concentration camps so terrifying to ordinary Germans if they don't really know what goes on there, or not Jewish? Well, they're led by Theodor Eicher, and he's the head of the Death's Head units. Yes, they call themselves the Death's Head. They have a symbol of a skull and crossbones as their main symbol. You get the idea that maybe they see themselves as the baddies. They're used to imprison undesirables. Sure, there's Jews, but there's also asocials, people that don't turn up to the right clubs, people that don't join in when everyone else is doing the Nazi salute, people that don't put out the Nazi flag on Hitler's birthday or other national days of celebration, a bit like on Friday, the 8th of May. Just saying. Also socialists and communists. Remember, socialists is just like communists, but less rabid, I guess. And gypsies. Oh, gyppos, they're always breaking the law. Well, the Nazis listened to you. There's a reason gypsies are more prevalent in Britain than they are in the rest of Europe. They were wiped out in Europe, etc. Homosexuals would be included in that. We'll talk about that more later in the course. They're run by Death's Head SS units and a key part of the Nazi terror state. Yes, that was supposed to be the hint to get Theodor Eicher as being your image under this heading. Some were death camps, but deaths were common anyway. I said that not all of them were death camps. They come later in the war. People die from hard labour. They're not fed well. They're not looked after well. They're not put in heated barracks. They're given lots of hard work to do. People just die of exhaustion. The Nazis laugh about it. People today talk about this sort of thing. You know, oh, pedos, they deserve it. Well, the Nazis are similar to that. There's a harsh regime, hard work, brutal treatment, and they are isolated from other Germans. There's two reasons. Ordinary Germans don't get to see what goes on in the camps, and the unknown is terrifying. And secondly, those people who are isolated from Germans means you can do whatever you want to them, and no one's going to complain. So, it's a key policy of the Nazi terror state The police, the courts, and Gestapo all sent people to the courts. They were the camps, sorry, and they were set up in early 1933. As Roland Freisler put it, racially foreign, racially degenerate, racially incurable, or seriously defective juveniles, that's children to thee and me, should be sent to centres and segregated, that means separated from and isolated, from those who are German and racially valuable. Yeah, what a lovely, lovely man Roland Freisler isn't. The purpose was to detain enemies. That includes political prisoners and it includes undesirables, as the card sort already had, which includes Jews. Hopefully these notes you can add to what the diagram shows, or not, it's up to you. They're isolated, they're run by the SS, therefore they're run to SS discipline, but these people aren't military, they're not trained, they're not fed well. It's pretty brutal. By the end of the 1930s, so hard labour, very little food. By the end of the 1930s, deaths are pretty common in these camps, and the Nazi leadership simply doesn't care. During the Second World War, some of them are converted into death camps, and their sole purpose is to kill people. I'm not diminishing it by using the word some. I'm pointing out the banality of evil, how easy it is to do small amounts of evil, and that's okay. And there you have it. That is a diagram of the Nazi terror state. All four sections pointing to the spider at the middle of the web. And so we come back to the triangle. Now, hopefully you've got this copied out and hopefully you've got support there. Here it is. Quick reminder. And then we've got that bit already. And here, oh, you should fill in, I bet you didn't pause that. If you did, dang. I'd like you to fill in that bit on terror. How does terror help the Nazis keep control? How would you sum it up in a box? Pause the video at this point and have a go. I'm going to assume you've paused the video. I'm going to assume you've had enough time to go through that. And of course, you could pause for as long as you liked. You can see why I couldn't split this into two lessons very easily. My answer is this. It's not the right answer, it's just mine. It says some Germans did not support the Nazis, but they did not actively oppose them because of the terror state the Nazis set up. Organizations like the Gestapo spied on Germans. Those the Nazis were suspicious of were often sent to the concentration camps run by Himmler's SS. The lack of an opposition made it easier for the Nazis to stay in power. My contention is that the Nazi terror state is important because it stops people trying to go against the Nazis, not because it's somehow brilliant. It's not. Not because it's somehow, I don't know, efficient. It's not. Not because it's somehow able to keep an eye on literally everybody and arrest anyone who goes against the Nazis. It doesn't and it can't. There's only one Gestapo agent to every 22,000 Germans. They can't possibly keep an eye on everybody. There aren't enough of them. What it does is it convinces people through a climate of fear not to bother opposing the Nazis. It weakens opposition. Oh yeah, there's that bit as well. So at this point, I'm going to set a homework task. I realize you're working from home. Bear with me. The point is, it's the extra bit. It says, using the sheet and the source you've been given, answer the examination style question in your books. And it's due next lesson. Now, I don't know what that means in these terms. These are 2 lessons here, plus a homework. It should provide you with useful and helpful practice on paper 3 source technique. If you skip on a slide on the thing that I've attached, the PowerPoint I've attached to show my homework, you'll find this weird half sheet. It was originally doubled up, so you could print it off and chop it in 2 to save on printing. I guess for you guys, you could write your answer on the other side of the sheet if you wish, and then stick it in. Now, if you do this task, I've explained on the show my homework that you should do it, and you can, if you wish, submit it to me. But if you do, I would ask you to self-mark it using the mark scheme on the last self-marking thing that I gave. That was the lesson 04 supplemental, where I show you a sample mark scheme. Go back to that video, find that section, pause it. You can use that mark scheme to mark your own answer. We've got an account of life in Nazi Germany by an American journalist who was living in Germany in 1937. What you've got to do is infer. Remember, you've got to infer why it is they say what they do in the source. So perhaps you take a phrase here and you back it up with things you know about society based on the diagram you just created. That's inference with context. Or you take it a stage further and you talk about the purpose of this source. Why was the American journalist writing what he wrote? What was he trying to say? Does he agree with what he's saying? As in, is he setting this up as something that's a bit odd? Or is he setting this up to say, I think Germans are a bit over paranoid? Does it explain why Germans are paranoid based on what you know about the Nazi terror state, for example? Now, there are some advice at the bottom there. There's 3 points of advice on how to answer these questions. You've got the mark scheme from the Lesson 04 supplemental. So you know what the mark scheme is. It's out of 7. Level 1 is just repeating surface detail with no real explanations. Level 2 is inferring with context. Level 3 is saying, okay, it's useful because of the purpose, the audience, the receipt. We don't know the receipt of this source. There's no way of guessing. It's an English language source. It's aimed at Americans. We're not doing a course on America. So you can't talk about receipt. You can talk about purpose. You can talk about audience. And you can talk about access to information. Does the American journalist really know what's going on? Does the person he's speaking to in the source know what's going on? Do you see my point? And you can talk about the intentional climate of fear, that this shows that Germans were overemphasizing the importance and overemphasizing the efficiency and power of the terror state, for example. But you see how this works. So hopefully that's been useful. Hang on. Hopefully that works. That's the end of the talk through. And at this point, whoops, that button. At this point, you've now gone through 2 lessons worth of material. Hopefully this video hasn't been too long. Hopefully you've been playing along and pausing at the right points. And hopefully this has been helpful to you in making your notes and making sense of things. Just one last thing to say, and that is to remember, these lessons are deliberately designed to be full and fulsome. You are working at home in an unprecedented situation. If you need to take time and you need to come back to them later, then do so. If you need to go over them and make notes and take longer doing so, do so. The extension of the time that I've given this, I've given it 2 weeks, for example, is deliberate, so you can take them at your own pace. They will still be there for you to come back to. When we come back to school, hopefully this course will be complete. And the idea is you will go through each lesson and take your time with it. They're videos. Go back, pause, ask questions in the comments, even the silly ones. We'll do our level best to answer them. Other than that, thank you very much if you have been for watching Year 10. Stay at home, stay safe, and you'll see me in the next video.